So in this video, we're going to talk about referencing. And referencing is probably one of the best things you can possibly do to make your mixes really stand out and sound really good against other professionally mastered tracks. What I do is I'll just drag into a new audio track, just rename it reference, and then I'll have that, make sure it's unwarped. And then I'll usually just go back and forth and listen to this versus my track and make adjustments, whether it's on the groups, individual tracks, or on the master, just to kind of dial everything in a little bit better. Quick pro tip, I'll usually do key mapping to compare my track with the reference track really fast. Go to key map up here, and then I will select the solo button and choose some keyboard button on your computer keyboard. And go to your main track, your master, and group everything except for span, which we looked at in the previous video to just kind of look at the frequencies, and your Swiss Army meter, or if you have a Lufs meter that you're using. I'll group everything except for those things, and then click here and map that to the on or off button for that group. And that way, when you hit that button, you can go back and forth really fast between your reference track. And notice as it solos this, I'll turn the reference track off because I don't want to hear it unless I'm going to solo it. So if I go to my main, now you can see that it's going to mute everything here. It turns on that reference track to solo, but everything on my main track is turned off right here. And then I'll use span to go back and forth and say, how bright are my frequencies on the drop versus theirs? Like, how's my sub sitting versus theirs? And referencing is definitely the best way, I think, to train your ear and to get a better track that's going to be mixed well with other tracks. So I'm just going to hit that keyboard shortcut and go back and forth, and we'll just look at the frequencies and span. So I noticed in this track, it's actually a little bit brighter, especially in this frequency range around 1.5 to 2K. So one thing I might do is I might be like, okay, well, let me go back to, and then I'll maybe give a little bit of a boost there, maybe for 1.5K or something, maybe just give a little bit of brightness. I could also go to those individual instruments, say the bass patches or some of these lead synths, and brighten those up instead. It's good to kind of just use your ears and really compare and go back and forth. So I made a little bit of a boost. Let's go back and check it out. Bring up span again. Say, where do you go? So I noticed my sub is actually quite a bit louder than theirs. So one thing I might do is I might go back to either the individual sub track itself, or maybe I'll, just turn down the overall basses group a little bit. Maybe that needs to be turned down. And then, just find a good track that sounds really good. Find a high quality WAV file. Don't use an MP3. Try to get a high quality download from Bandcamp or SoundCloud. Or if you have to, you can choose Beatport. There's high quality AIFFs or WAV files. Last thing I'll do to check off the mix is listen in mono. So if you grab a utility and you place it after your final limiter, then I can turn on mono right here. But this is a good way to be able to check and see if anything's out of phase. If you turn on mono and you have like a synth or some sound that maybe you added effects to, maybe you widened it, did some stereo stuff on it, and it disappears, it's usually because you threw it out of phase. You can also check span. It has that correlation meter. If it goes farther to the right, everything's in phase usually. But if it sounds good in mono, typically it's going to sound good in stereo. And it's good to listen with your reference track and retune your ears, because your ears are going to play tricks on you. As a final export setting to send this off into the world, say for digital streaming like Spotify, Apple, or whatever, usually I will go into my Pro Elf. I'll turn on oversampling. If your computer can handle 16, that's great. And then I leave dither off unless you're exporting for CDs. If you want to, say, bounce this and put it on CDs to sell to fans or whatever, if you're still doing that, then dither would be 16-bit, and then you would render that differently in the export settings. But I leave dither off because I'm exporting at 24-bit. So what I'll do is I'll usually just take Ableton's loop bracket. I'll set it to the length of the track that I want to export. Usually I'll have like an end marker just so I know that's where I want it to stop. And then I'll select that. And then if you hit Command-Shift-R, or you could just go to Export Audio Video, then you can kind of reference and check where the render length is going to be. It says 66, but you can notice really it's at like 67.5 is where that loop bracket's ending. So I can just type here 67 if I want it to be accurate, maybe 67.5. Sometimes it changes. It's kind of finicky sometimes, but I'll do something like that. And then sample rate for distribution is 44.1. Say if you're uploading to DistroKid or wanting to put it to Apple Music or Spotify. And then I encode as a wave 24 with no dither. If you're doing 16-bit for like CDs or something, you can. But now most streaming platforms are allowing even lossless. Like Spotify just went lossless recently. And so now there's a chance to upload higher quality waves, which is beautiful because your music's going to sound better. You can also do MP3 here if you wanted to. And then I export this and just drop it onto your computer. And then that's typically my settings for bouncing out your track. And hopefully this was helpful. And feel free to hit me up anytime. I go by Philia. My name is Dan Giffin. Check out the Ableton podcast, the abletonpodcast.com. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. Much love.